We looked at the two largest discount grocers here. There are 81 Walmarts in the greater Houston area. There's 36 Aldi stores.
Everyone assumes they already know who wins this fight. Walmart is bigger. Walmart has more locations. Walmart has been the default answer to the question of where to find the lowest grocery prices for so long that most shoppers stopped asking the question entirely. That assumption just cost you more money than you realize. The winner is not who you think, and the margin of victory is not what you would predict. 15 items, 2 stores, one result that changes everything. Starting right now. Number 15. Eggs. A dozen large eggs, the most basic item on any grocery list you could name. At Aldi, the price came out to $1.39. At Walmart, the exact same dozen rang up at $2.12. That is a difference of 73 cents on a single carton of eggs. 73 cents does not sound like much sitting on its own, but I grabbed my phone calculator anyway, just to keep an honest running score of every single item on this list. I remember standing in the Walmart egg cooler, genuinely confused for a second. The carton looked identical to the one I had already set down in my Aldi bag an hour earlier. Same grade, same size, same everything printed right there on the label itself. Yet one store charged noticeably more for the exact same product sitting in the exact same kind of cooler case. That gap became my running total for the rest of this trip, and I promised myself to track it honestly. I even checked the expiration dates printed on both cartons, just to rule out one carton being older stock than the other. Both were dated nearly identical, so freshness was not the real explanation here at all. 73 cents down, 14 items still left to go. A friend of mine who works in retail once told me that eggs are one of those items stores use to build trust with shoppers, pricing them low enough that people assume the whole store must be a bargain. Clearly, that strategy works differently depending on which store you actually walk into. This was not the moment that actually shocked me, though. That moment was still coming, and it arrived faster than I honestly expected. It made me realize how many small purchases we make on autopilot every week, never once stopping to compare two nearly identical products sitting on two different shelves in two different stores. Now stick with me, because things escalate quickly from here on out. Number 14. Bread. A standard loaf of white sandwich bread, the kind almost every single kitchen keeps sitting on the counter. Aldi charged 95 cents for their own store brand loaf. Walmart charged $1.28 for a nearly identical white bread option. Another 33 cents added to the growing gap between these two stores. I squeezed both loaves right there in the aisle, comparing softness and freshness like some kind of amateur bread inspector. Honestly, they felt nearly identical in texture, weight, and even the ingredient list on the back. My running total climbed to $1.06. Still small, still fairly manageable honestly at this early point. I almost stopped keeping track right there in the bread aisle, if I am being completely honest with you. Something told me to keep going anyway, just to see exactly where this whole experiment landed by the end. I actually toasted a slice from each loaf the next morning, side by side in the same toaster, just to be thorough about this whole comparison. Both browned evenly and tasted essentially the same with butter melted on top. Good thing I did, because the pattern was only just beginning to reveal itself. The next item is exactly where things stopped feeling like a coincidence and started feeling like an actual repeating pattern. Hit that like button and subscribe right now if you want to see exactly how high this final number climbs by the end, because trust me, you will genuinely want to see it for yourself. Number 13. Milk. 1 gallon of whole milk. Easily the heaviest item sitting in either cart by far. Aldi price, $2.29. Walmart price, $2.84. 55 cents apart on one single gallon of milk. Both jugs came from the same regional dairy supplier, according to the small print on the label. Same cows essentially, just two different price stickers slapped on top by two different retailers. My running total jumped to $1.61. Milk is one item almost nobody skips on a weekly list, so a gap like this repeats itself constantly. I thought about my own grandmother standing in this exact kind of aisle decades ago. She used to drive clear across town chasing milk sales, sometimes saving barely a dime a gallon after burning gas just to get there and back. She would have genuinely loved a comparison video like this one, honestly, given how much she cared about every single penny saved. I also checked the expiration window printed on both jugs, curious whether one store simply moves inventory faster than the other. Both jugs gave me roughly the same number of days before needing to be used, so shelf life was not the deciding factor here either. 3 items in, and one store was already pulling ahead by a real, measurable margin over the other. But milk turned out to be absolutely nothing compared to what came next on this list, and I mean that with complete sincerity. The next item nearly doubled my entire running total by itself, and I never saw it coming. Number 12. Bananas. Priced simply per pound at both stores, with no brand name attached to either bunch. Aldi charged 44 cents a pound for theirs that day. Walmart charged 58 cents a pound for a visually identical bunch sitting just a few feet away in spirit. For a typical bunch weighing about 3 pounds, that difference came out to 42 cents total. Ripeness looked nearly identical between both bunches, just slightly green at the tips, how I like them. No difference in quality that I could spot, only a difference in what I ended up paying. Running total, $2.03. Small produce items were adding up faster than I honestly expected this early into the trip. A produce worker nearby mentioned that banana pricing tends to shift weekly depending on how quickly a store moves through their shipment before spoilage sets in. That explanation made sense, but it did not make the price gap sting any less standing there with my cart. I started to wonder out loud what would happen once we finally reached the meat department. Meat is where the real money usually lives inside any full grocery basket. I was not wrong to wonder about that one bit, and the very next aisle proved exactly why meat deserves its own separate conversation entirely. Number 11. Ground beef. 1 pound of standard 80/20 ground beef, sitting in nearly identical packaging at both stores. Aldi rang up at $3.79. Walmart rang up at $4.47. 68 cents apart on a single pound of ground meat. Both packages listed the exact same fat ratio and were sealed the same day, according to the printed dates. I even pressed a thumb gently against each package, and the color and texture underneath looked practically identical. Running total, $2.71. I also thought about how often ground beef ends up in weekly meals. Tacos on Tuesday, spaghetti on Thursday, burgers on the weekend, meaning this single gap repeats itself constantly throughout any given month. This is actually the point where I said something out loud in the store, without even meaning to. A worker restocking a nearby shelf overheard me and asked what was wrong. I told him I was comparing prices between 2 different stores for a video I was filming. He just smiled and said, everyone eventually finds out the same thing once they actually sit down and compare the numbers for themselves. He mentioned he had worked at both kinds of stores earlier in his career, and the pricing philosophy behind each one was simply built differently from day one. I did not fully understand what he meant in that exact moment. I would understand it completely by the time this entire list was finished, standing there at the register with 2 very different receipts in my hand. Number 10. Chicken breast. Boneless, skinless chicken breast, priced simply per pound at both locations. Aldi price, $2.49. Walmart price, $3.12. 63 cents apart on this one item alone. I flipped both packages over, looking for any hormone-free or antibiotic-free claims that might explain the price gap. Neither package carried any special label at all, just plain chicken breast, plainly priced differently. Running total, $3.34. Chicken breast is one of those staples almost every single household buys on a weekly basis without fail. Multiply a gap like this across an entire year of regular weekly shopping trips. The number gets uncomfortable fast once you actually sit down and do that math for yourself. A dietitian I follow online once pointed out that chicken breast is usually the single biggest recurring meat expense for households trying to eat lean. That comment stuck with me standing there in the meat aisle with 2 nearly identical packages in my hands. I did the math later that same night, sitting quietly at my own kitchen table. It genuinely kept me thinking for a minute longer than I expected it to. But chicken was not even the biggest surprise still waiting in the meat aisle that day. And honestly, I was not prepared for what came next. Cheese was next, and cheese is honestly what changed everything about how I saw this entire comparison. Number 9. Block cheddar cheese. An 8-ounce block, the exact same weight sold at both stores. Aldi charged $1.99 for their own store brand block. Walmart charged $2.98 for a nearly identical cheddar block on their shelf. That is 99 cents apart on one small block of cheese. I actually tasted a small piece of each once I got home that evening, cut side by side on the same plate. Honestly, I could barely tell them apart, and my partner guessed wrong when I asked her to pick the cheaper one. Running total, $4.33. I stood there holding both blocks side by side under the store lighting, just comparing them. Same weight, same type, nearly identical packaging design, if I'm being honest. Almost a full $1 apart for what looked like the exact same product in every way that mattered. She was genuinely surprised when I told her which block cost less, since her instinct was that the pricier-looking packaging must mean better cheese inside. That instinct, it turns out, is exactly what stores count on shoppers having. 9 items in, and the gap had already tripled from where it first started back at the eggs. If you are keeping track of your own pantry prices right now while watching this, drop a comment below and tell me which one of these items has surprised you the most so far. I genuinely read every single comment on these videos, and I want to know if your own local store prices actually match what I found here today, since prices can shift slightly depending on where you live, because the next 6 items are exactly where this entire comparison stopped being close at all. Number 8. Coffee. A standard bag of ground coffee, roughly the same size and roast at both stores. Aldi price, $3.39. Walmart price, $5.12. $1.73 apart on coffee alone. Both bags were medium roast, ground for a standard drip machine, roughly the same weight down to the ounce. The only real difference I could find printed anywhere was the country of origin listed in tiny letters near the bottom. Running total, $6.06. Multiply one bag a week across an entire year, and this single item alone could quietly fund an entire extra grocery trip for someone shopping on a tight budget. Coffee drinkers watching this one should genuinely feel a little sting right about now. I personally drink coffee every single morning without fail, rain or shine, no exceptions. A gap like this, repeated weekly for an entire year, turns into real, noticeable money by the time December rolls back around. A barista friend of mine once explained that roast origin rarely justifies a huge price jump for basic ground coffee sold in a plastic canister rather than a specialty bag. I actually walked back and checked the shelf tag twice, fully convinced I had misread it the first time around. I had not misread anything at all, unfortunately. The next item confirmed I was no longer imagining any kind of pattern here, and it involved a product that sits in nearly every single pantry in the country. Number 7. Peanut butter. A standard 16-ounce jar, smooth variety available at both locations. Aldi charged $1.99 for their own version. Walmart charged $2.92 for a similar name brand jar nearby, 93 cents apart on one single jar of peanut butter. I checked for oil separation on both jars, since that usually signals a cheaper processing method behind the scenes. Neither jar showed any separation at all. Both looked equally smooth and freshly sealed. Running total, $6.99. That single jar alone could be the difference between a full grocery bag and an empty one by the end of a tight month for some families. Peanut butter is a pantry staple in almost every single home with kids or grandkids visiting on a regular basis. Buy this weekly, and that small gap compounds quietly in the background without anyone ever really noticing it happening. Nobody really notices 93 cents at any single checkout, if we are being honest. Everybody eventually notices it after an entire year of checkouts stacked right on top of each other. My kids could not tell the difference at all when I spread both versions on crackers later that evening for a quick blind taste test at home. I was starting to understand exactly why that store worker had smiled at me earlier in this trip. But the very next item is the one that genuinely made me stop walking altogether, right in the middle of the aisle, phone still in hand. Number 6. Pasta sauce. A standard jar of marinara sauce, similar size and ingredients listed at both stores. Aldi price, $1.35. Walmart price, $2.48. $1.13 apart on a single jar of sauce. I even compared the sugar content listed per serving on both labels, since sauces can quietly hide a lot of it. Both jars listed almost the exact same number, give or take a single gram. Running total, $8.12. I checked the ingredient labels side by side out of pure curiosity, right there in the aisle. Nearly identical ingredients on both jars. Tomatoes, herbs, a touch of sugar, basic seasoning. No meaningful quality difference that I personally could find between the two jars. Just a meaningfully different price tag stuck right on the front of each one. Both jars were even made in facilities located in the same general region, according to the fine print near the barcode. $8 deep, and we still had 9 full items left to go on this entire list. I genuinely did not expect the next stretch of this trip to get even worse than this. It did, and it happened quickly, faster than I expected once I started tallying the remaining items on my list. Number 5. Canned beans. A standard 15-ounce can of black beans, sitting on nearly identical shelves at both stores. Aldi charged 65 cents for their own store brand can. Walmart charged 89 cents for a similar name brand can, right next to it in spirit, 24 cents apart on this one single item. Sodium content on both cans came out nearly identical, so this was not a case of one brand quietly cutting corners. It was simply two stores charging two different prices for what amounted to the same exact can. Running total, $8.36. Beans show up in chili, in burritos, in side dishes almost every week for a lot of households trying to stretch protein without spending a fortune on meat. This particular gap felt genuinely small compared to the last several items on this list. But small gaps on cheap, everyday items are exactly how stores quietly win your entire yearly grocery budget without you noticing. A can here, a jar there. Nobody really adds it all up in real time while they are shopping. My mother-in-law swears by buying beans dry instead of canned to save even more. And honestly, after this comparison, I understand her logic a little better now. I was adding it up in real time, and the number kept climbing steadily with every aisle. The next item pushed everything into territory I genuinely did not see coming at all, and it is one of the most common freezer staples in any home. Number 4. Frozen pizza. A standard Supreme-style frozen pizza, similar toppings and crust type at both stores. Aldi price, $2.89. Walmart price, $4.18. $1.29 apart on one single frozen pizza. I actually baked both pizzas that same night, back to back, just to settle the taste question once and for all. My honest verdict, they tasted close enough that I would never pay extra for the pricier one again. Running total, $9.65. For a family that orders frozen pizza on busy weeknights once or twice a month, this gap alone could cover an extra pizza entirely just from switching stores. I actually laughed a little standing right there in the frozen food aisle. 9 items in, and the total gap had already crossed $9 full between these two stores. For 15 items that started out barely a couple of dollars apart back at the eggs. My kids actually preferred the crust on the cheaper pizza, which honestly caught me off guard when they said it without knowing which one cost less. The math was no longer subtle by this particular point in the trip. It was becoming genuinely obvious to anyone paying close attention. But the final 3 items delivered the actual shock this entire title promised you from the very beginning. And honestly, this is the part I most wanted to show you. Number 3. Orange juice. A half-gallon carton, not from concentrate, sold at both stores. Aldi charged $2.49. Walmart charged $3.48. 99 cents apart on this one carton alone. Both cartons listed identical vitamin C content and roughly the same amount of natural pulp inside. Taste-wise, poured side by side into 2 glasses, I genuinely could not pick a clear winner between them. Running total, $10.64. Orange juice is one of those items families buy on repeat every single week without ever really pausing to compare prices between stores. $10 on 15 everyday items, most of them individually priced under $5 each. I remember thinking about my own mother standing in this exact kind of aisle countless times before. She shops once a week, the same 15 or 20 items on repeat, month after month without fail. A gap like this, every single week, adds up to hundreds of dollars a year without her ever once noticing a single receipt closely. She has been buying the same brand out of habit for years, never once comparing it side by side against a cheaper alternative sitting right there on the same shelf. That thought genuinely sat heavy with me for the rest of this trip. The next item made that feeling sit even heavier than before, and it involves a product almost every single household buys without thinking twice. Number 2. Paper towels. A 6-roll multi-pack, nearly identical sheet count listed at both stores. Aldi price, $4.99. Walmart price, $6.97. $1.98 apart on paper towels alone. I ran a quick spill test with both rolls back at home, soaking up the same amount of water on my counter. Absorbency felt basically identical, maybe a tiny edge to the cheaper roll if anything at all. Running total, $12.62. A household going through 2 of these multi-packs a month faces this exact gap over and over, quietly, without any single receipt ever feeling dramatic on its own. Paper towels do not go bad sitting in a closet for months at a time. People stockpile them constantly without ever really thinking twice about which store they originally came from. A gap this size on one bulk household item is not pocket change anymore by any real measure. Over an entire year of restocking a household, that single item alone could quietly fund an extra grocery trip or 2 without anyone even realizing it. It is closer to an entire extra item you genuinely could have bought with just that difference alone. One single item left standing on this entire list, and this final one ended up deciding the whole comparison completely by itself, tipping the entire final total further than anything before it. Number 1. Laundry detergent. A large bottle, roughly 64 loads, nearly identical size sold at both stores. Aldi charged $6.49 for their own bottle. Walmart charged $9.97 for a comparable name brand bottle nearby. $3.48 apart on one single bottle of detergent. I did the cost per load math right there in the aisle, since that number matters more than the sticker price alone. The cheaper bottle worked out to a noticeably lower cost per load than the pricier one, even before counting the extra sale price. Final running total, $16.10. Detergent turned out to be the single biggest individual gap of the entire 15-item list, more than double the next closest item. Scent options looked nearly identical between both bottles too, so this was not a case of paying more for a nicer fragrance either. 15 items, one shopping list, two completely different stores on the exact same day. $16.10 separated them by the time I finally reached my car in the parking lot. That is not some small rounding error hiding quietly somewhere in the receipt. That is a full extra meal, sitting quietly in the difference between two receipts for the exact same 15 groceries. The store worker back in the meat aisle was right all along, it turns out. Everyone eventually finds out the same thing, once they actually sit down and compare the real numbers for themselves instead of just guessing. $16 on one single trip quietly turns into hundreds of dollars a year for anyone shopping weekly like most families genuinely do. That is the winner. That is the shock. And now you know it too, well before your very next trip to either one of these stores. Hey, thanks for watching. If this comparison changed how you think about your own weekly grocery list and where those extra dollars are quietly slipping away, let us know in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear your own numbers. Want to see me run this same exact test with 15 completely different items next time, maybe snacks or household cleaning supplies? Click on the left. And if you do not want to miss the next price comparison before your next shopping trip, hit that subscribe button right now.